moment that seemed to stop the internet cold. A man long revered as a Hollywood titan and pillar of discretion, Tyler Perry, sat alone in front of a softly lit camera, his voice carrying a tremor that felt equal parts guilt and catharsis. "I crossed a line," he said. "I was supposed to be her support, not her escape." And with that single admission, a secret that had rumbled beneath the surface for years was finally exposed to the world. The man who helped Meghan Markle and Prince Harry escape royal life now stood at the center of a storm no one saw coming. Before we continue, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The phrase emotional affair doesn't scream headlines the way sex scandals do. But what if that emotional intimacy was so deep, so immersive, and so continuous that it redefined the boundaries of fidelity? What if it involved secret late-night calls that lasted hours, long weekend retreats that were explained away as business, and private conversations where one married woman whispered her truth to another man, a man who wasn't her husband? What if that man was Tyler Perry, and the woman was Meghan Markle, still very much married to Prince Harry? This is not a tabloid whisper. This is a confession from Perry himself, triggered by the sudden leak of a voice memo that would ripple across royal circles, Hollywood boardrooms, and every media platform imaginable. The voice belonged to Meghan, soft, trembling, maybe even tearful, confessing to a close friend, "Tyler gets me in ways Harry never could." It was personal, raw, and devastating. And when that audio went public, it broke open a Pandora's box that no palace press office or Hollywood PR firm could ever contain. To understand the gravity of what just happened, you have to understand the web of loyalty, secrecy, and emotional entanglement that grew between Tyler Perry and Meghan Markle. It began as a rescue mission, Perry offering his home, his security team, and his emotional support to the couple when they fled the monarchy and its suffocating expectations. But according to Perry's own words now, that support spiraled into something deeper, something he admits crossed lines. But why now? Why did Tyler Perry decide to speak, and what pushed him to break years of silence? More importantly, how does Prince Harry fit into all of this? And what has been his reaction to this revelation? Because make no mistake, behind the headlines lies a broken marriage gasping for air, a trusted friendship torched by betrayal, and a Hollywood empire now at risk of collapsing under the weight of one secret too many. There are moments in every public figure's life where private choices explode into public consequences. For Meghan Markle, it was being caught between two worlds, the royal and the Hollywood, the dutiful wife and the woman struggling for identity. For Tyler Perry, it was navigating his compassion as a helper, only to find himself emotionally entangled in a situation with no safe exit. And for Prince Harry, it's the realization that while he was fighting to protect his wife from the media, someone he trusted, someone they both called a savior, might have been slowly pulling her away. Let's go back to the beginning. The year was 2020. The world was in chaos. The pandemic raged. The monarchy was on edge. And Meghan Markle and Prince Harry shocked the world with their decision to step back from royal duties. Amid a storm of headlines and uncertainty, Tyler Perry entered the narrative, quietly, powerfully, and with apparent generosity. He offered them his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion, security details, and space to breathe. To the public, Perry was a friend, a hero, a neutral harbor in their tempestuous journey. But inside those gates, far from the flashing cameras and royal curtsies, something more was beginning to form. According to multiple insiders, Meghan found in Tyler a confidant, someone who listened not out of obligation, but out of shared pain. Both had lived through intense media scrutiny. Both had struggled with identity. Meghan as a biracial woman never fully accepted by the crown. Tyler as a black filmmaker often dismissed by Hollywood's elite. They connected over trauma, ambition, and a longing for peace. And for hours, sometimes deep into the night, they would talk. Phone logs later surfaced showing call durations between Perry and Meghan lasting upwards of 3 to 4 hours, not once, but repeatedly. While Harry was often busy on Zoom calls, setting up charity foundations, or distracted by the swirl of press around their royal exit, Meghan's bond with Tyler intensified. Some describe it as a friendship. Others say it was unmistakably more. It wasn't physical, at least according to Perry. In his words, "We never kissed. We never touched. But we fell into something emotional. Something I couldn't control." That distinction may matter to some. But to others, especially to a husband, it's a betrayal just the same. The turning point came during what insiders now call the Malibu weekend. Tyler and Meghan reportedly spent a 3-day weekend at one of Perry's secluded properties under the guise of script consultations. Meghan has long wanted to develop her own documentary content, and Perry, ever the mentor, offered his help. But by Sunday evening, staff reported seeing them seated by the fire, wine in hand, deeply engrossed in a conversation that stretched hours beyond midnight. One staffer later said they weren't working. They were bonding. That was not a work trip. For Harry, the warning signs were subtle but accumulating. Meghan grew emotionally distant, often defensive when asked about Perry. Their fights intensified. And while nothing in Meghan's behavior suggested a physical affair, her emotional absence was impossible to ignore. She used to come to me with her pain, Harry reportedly told a friend. Now she tells him. But Harry didn't confront Perry. Not yet. He still trusted him. That trust would shatter only after the voice memo was leaked, a memo Meghan left for a friend, never meant to be heard by the world, never meant to reach Harry's ears. In the memo, Meghan's words were aching. Tyler sees me. He understands my struggles. Harry's just not equipped. He's damaged, and I'm exhausted. The recording was leaked anonymously to a major online tabloid and verified through voice analysis within hours. The moment it hit the public, everything changed. Headlines exploded. The internet imploded. And Tyler Perry could no longer remain silent. Sitting in a chair, against a dark backdrop, Perry looked directly into the lens of his camera and addressed the world. There was no press release, no studio polish, just Perry, stripped of character and title, confessing the one thing he never thought he'd have to. It started as support, he said. But I crossed a line. The video lasted 8 minutes. In it, Perry never denied the emotional depth. He acknowledged it, owned it, and apologized. Not to the public, but directly to Prince Harry. That video has now been viewed over 100 million times. Since then, reactions have poured in from every corner. Some call Perry brave. Others, a manipulator hiding behind emotion. Meghan has yet to comment. Her publicist issued a brief statement denying any wrongdoing and emphasizing her gratitude for Perry's support during a difficult time. But insiders say she's been devastated behind the scenes, not just because of the leak, but because of how Perry chose to address it publicly. And Harry? He's reportedly gone silent. As we launch into this multi-part breakdown, we'll take you deep inside every layer of this emotional earthquake. From the early days of Meghan and Perry's bond, to the secrets buried within that leaked voice memo, to the devastating fallout now threatening to unravel not just a friendship, but a marriage, a brand, and a public persona. This is not just a scandal. It's a human story of loyalty, pain, and the invisible lines we cross when we stop seeing the boundaries between care and desire. This is the story of Meghan Markle, Tyler Perry, and the emotional affair that changed everything. No bold text, no asterisks, fully fleshed out storytelling with a gripping arc. There was a time, not too long ago, when Tyler Perry's name was almost never mentioned in the same breath as royal scandal. He was known as a self-made media mogul, the man who created Medea, built a billion-dollar empire from scratch, and purchased a sprawling film studio on the grounds of a former Confederate Army base, poetic justice and bricks and mortar. He was, by every measure, a success story the world could admire. And then, in a surprising twist of modern royal history, he opened his door and his heart to two fugitives from the crown, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. It was March 2020. Just weeks earlier, Meghan and Harry had dropped their bombshell announcement. They were stepping back from their roles as senior members of the British royal family. The news had sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace and the global press. Dubbed Megxit, the couple's decision was not only controversial, it was unprecedented. No one, not even Princess Diana, had walked away from the crown in this way by choice, without scandal forcing their hand. And they did it with a newborn child in tow, and without a clear plan for what came next. That's where Tyler Perry came in. At the time, few knew how closely Perry had been following Meghan's journey. He had watched, like millions, as the British tabloids tore into her day after day. He had seen the headlines that dripped with coded racism, the commentators who questioned her every move, her every smile, even her very right to be called a duchess. He had watched her Oprah interview, listened as she described her suicidal thoughts and the royal institution's refusal to offer help. And in her, he saw something familiar, the pain of being silenced, the weight of being misunderstood, and the trauma of being seen as a threat simply for existing. According to sources close to Perry, he didn't hesitate. With a single phone call, he offered the couple a secure residence, a private estate in Beverly Hills tucked away from prying eyes and aggressive paparazzi. Not just a house, but complete security support. He didn't ask for payment. He didn't make it conditional. He offered sanctuary. For Meghan, that gesture may have felt like a lifeline. Inside that mansion, miles away from Montecito and further still from Windsor Castle, something shifted. Meghan, no longer required to curtsy, perform, or smile on demand, reportedly felt like she could finally exhale. She was not only safe, she was seen. And the man who had offered her that space? Tyler Perry. From the outside, Perry remained the embodiment of calm discretion. There were no statements, no social media posts, no leaks. He didn't seek credit for his generosity. But inside the walls of his estate, something deeper was taking root. Perry and Meghan were spending more time together, not just as host and guest, but as two wounded souls finding connection in their shared isolation. Phone calls turned into lengthy private discussions. Meghan reportedly began confiding in him. Their conversations, according to a source close to Perry, ranged from career anxieties to unresolved family trauma to what she described as the suffocating silence within her marriage. Harry was there physically, the source claimed, but emotionally, Meghan felt alone. Tyler filled that gap, whether he meant to or not. By early summer of 2020, Harry and Meghan had officially moved into their own Montecito home. But the bond between Meghan and Tyler didn't dissolve with their departure. In fact, that's when it deepened. No longer sharing a roof, they now shared secrets. They messaged constantly. Late-night calls resumed. Meghan reportedly began seeking his advice on everything from public appearances to potential partnerships to how to handle the ever-mounting pressure of their new celebrity-fueled life in America. It didn't take long before Harry noticed the frequency of their exchanges. At first, he expressed no concern. Tyler was, after all, the man who had saved them. A friend, a mentor, a blessing in their time of need. But as Perry and Meghan's interactions grew more intense, longer calls, private meetings, shared events without Harry, things began to shift. According to one former staffer at the Montecito estate, Harry once jokingly said, "Should I be jealous of Tyler?" It may have been a joke. Or maybe it wasn't. That same summer, Perry invited Meghan to an exclusive industry gathering at his Atlanta studio. Publicly, it was described as a private think tank for creatives of color. Privately, it was something else, a weekend retreat, designed to foster creative partnerships. Meghan, without Harry, attended. It was the first time since stepping down from royal duties that she was surrounded not by royal advisors or palace courtiers, but by producers, directors, and writers who saw her as a peer, not a duchess. Those who were present described the atmosphere between Perry and Meghan as electric. It was like watching two people who finish each other's sentences, said one attendee. They weren't flirting, but they were definitely in sync. You could feel it. During one late-night fireside gathering, Meghan reportedly shared her dream of telling her own story, unfiltered, unedited, in her own words. Not through tabloids. Not through Buckingham Palace. Perry encouraged her. He suggested a docuseries. He offered studio space. He even hinted at collaborating directly. "You have something the world hasn't seen yet," he told her. That encouragement resonated. But according to Perry's later admission, it also laid the groundwork for emotional entanglement. In his now viral confession video, he described that night as the first time I felt something shift. It wasn't physical, but it was undeniable. In the weeks that followed, Meghan began to lean more on Perry than ever. Friends say she called him her anchor. She sent voice notes, some of which, sources claim, were deeply personal. And when things became rocky between her and Harry, especially during tense moments tied to their Netflix deal and the Spotify fallout, it was Perry she turned to for guidance. Harry, meanwhile, was growing increasingly withdrawn. He seemed distant, irritable. Close friends say he began to suspect that Meghan's bond with Perry had become something more than friendship, but he couldn't prove it. And perhaps, on some level, he didn't want to. Still, the emotional distance in their marriage was growing. And Perry, who initially offered sanctuary, now occupied a place in Meghan's life that no one, not even Harry, could match. He was her emotional safety net, her sounding board, and, as some now say, her most dangerous temptation. By early 2021, things began to unravel. Meghan and Perry were seen less frequently in public, but sources close to both say their private exchanges intensified. Meghan allegedly told Perry she felt like a stranger in her own marriage, that the weight of public life, motherhood, and unresolved pain from her royal past had created a rift between her and Harry that felt unbridgeable. "I don't think he knows who I am anymore," she reportedly said during one conversation. In hindsight, it's clear that what began as a friendship, rooted in rescue and gratitude, evolved into something layered, complex, and undeniably emotional. The question isn't whether it was physical. The question is whether it mattered. Because in the eyes of Prince Harry and millions watching, emotional betrayal can cut deeper than any physical affair, especially when it's committed by someone you called your friend. No bold text, no asterisks, fully fleshed out storytelling with depth, emotional build-up, and immersive pacing. In every scandalous revelation, there's always a point where everything begins to blur. Not in the headlines or the gossip, but in the people involved. That gray area where comfort begins to resemble connection, where friendship bends into emotional intimacy, and where two people start to see each other in ways they're not supposed to. For Tyler Perry and Meghan Markle, that tipping point wasn't marked by a single explosive moment. It unfolded quietly, over whispered confessions, carefully chosen weekends, and stolen hours far from the flashing cameras and marital tension. According to sources close to both parties, the most critical chapters of their emotional relationship weren't written in California or under royal scrutiny. They were carved out in the heart of Georgia, at Tyler Perry's remote retreat nestled deep within the forested outskirts of Atlanta. A property so private that even longtime staffers at his studio knew nothing of its existence until Meghan's visits started becoming a regular event. To the public, these were creative sabbaticals. Meghan, exploring documentary projects and podcast themes, sought mentorship from one of the most successful writer-director-producers in the industry. Perry, known for his meticulous work ethic and intense privacy, allegedly found in Meghan a rare kind of collaborator, someone who could speak his language not just as an artist, but as a survivor of media trauma, race-based hostility, and institutional betrayal. But those visits, according to sources who later spoke under condition of anonymity, weren't just about production meetings or narrative structure. They were emotional sanctuaries, deliberately carved out spaces where Meghan could be vulnerable, and where Tyler, increasingly, became the person she trusted most. The first retreat happened in the fall of 2021. Meghan, overwhelmed with public obligations and private turmoil, accepted Perry's invitation to spend a quiet weekend away from the media buzz. Harry, occupied with a charity commitment in Aspen, reportedly gave his blessing. It was meant to be a short break, a chance to think, write, and regroup. But what unfolded over those 3 days would become the blueprint for what insiders now describe as the beginning of a deepening emotional entanglement. Perry's retreat was unlike anything Meghan had experienced before. It wasn't royal opulence, no gold-trimmed chandeliers or ceremonial guards. It was earthy, warm, surrounded by trees that whispered secrets in the wind and thick glass windows that let the sunset in like fire. It was silent. It was safe. And it was completely cut off from everything she was trying to escape. That first night, according to two staffers who worked the property, Meghan and Perry sat on the back terrace until almost 3 in the morning. There was no alcohol involved, just conversation, and the occasional pause, filled with the kind of quiet only two people deeply listening to one another can maintain. One of the staffers recalled walking past the open kitchen and hearing Meghan say, "Sometimes I wonder who I would have become if I hadn't married Harry." The comment wasn't bitter. It wasn't even regretful, but it lingered. And Perry's response, according to the same source, was soft. "Maybe you still can be her." That weekend wasn't isolated. Over the following months, Meghan returned to the retreat at least 3 more times. Each time, it was presented as a professional reset. But each visit grew longer. Each stay became more personal. There were spa sessions, hikes, long kitchen conversations. And then there were the emotional confessions, not in passing, but full, deliberate disclosures. Meghan, during one of these retreats, reportedly opened up about her emotional struggles in her marriage. According to someone familiar with that conversation, she said, "Harry loves me. But sometimes I feel like I'm managing his pain more than living my own life." It was a statement that struck Perry deeply. Those around him said his mood noticeably shifted after that visit. Perry, for all his cinematic control and professional precision, had a deeply personal history with women who felt voiceless, cornered, and lost in relationships that stifled their light. He had built an empire off telling their stories. And now, here she was, Meghan, offering him one of the most high-profile, unfiltered stories he'd ever heard. Only this time, it wasn't for a script. It was real. It was raw. And it was quietly rewriting their relationship. Over time, the boundaries between mentor and friend, confidant and emotional partner, became increasingly difficult to distinguish. One specific weekend, in early 2022, marked what multiple insiders described as the moment everything changed. Meghan had arrived unexpectedly. According to studio staff, she looked visibly upset. The Netflix docuseries production had reportedly hit a creative wall. There were rumors of Harry pushing back on editorial decisions, wanting to cut segments that Meghan felt were her truth. The tension between the couple was rising. Meghan, frustrated and emotionally frayed, flew to Atlanta. She and Perry reportedly didn't leave the house the entire weekend. Meals were brought in. No other guests were permitted. And by the third night, Perry's security team was told to give them absolute privacy. A source who had access to interior footage from external security cameras said they were in the same room for hours, lights dimmed, just talking. It wasn't romantic, but it was something. You could see it in the body language, closeness, not physical, but emotional. They were completely tuned into each other. What did they talk about? No one knows for sure. But shortly after that retreat, Perry began pulling away from public engagements. He canceled several appearances and was noticeably absent from major events. And Meghan? She returned to Montecito with a different energy, more guarded, but oddly empowered. Harry, however, reportedly sensed the shift. Their arguments increased. At one point, a close friend claimed Harry accused Meghan of checking out emotionally. Despite this, Meghan continued to maintain contact with Perry. Voice notes, private emails, and what some now call the most damning piece of the puzzle, long, late-night FaceTime calls that Harry eventually discovered in her phone records. It's unclear if he confronted her about them immediately. But what is clear, according to a palace source, is that his trust in both Meghan and Perry began to unravel. To understand the magnitude of Perry's emotional involvement, one must consider how rare it is for him to form this level of intimacy with anyone. Known for keeping his circle small and his personal life even smaller, Perry is fiercely private. He's built an empire by staying behind the scenes. And yet, here he was, opening his home, his heart, and, ultimately, his boundaries for a woman whose life was entangled in royal obligations and public scrutiny. Some may argue it was just friendship. Others would call it emotional infidelity. By the time the public caught wind of their closeness, the emotional web had already tightened. And when that now infamous voice memo of Meghan's confession was leaked, the one where she said, "Tyler gets me in ways Harry never could," it confirmed what many had suspected, that the emotional lines had long been crossed. It wasn't about a kiss. It wasn't about sex. It was about connection. A connection that Harry could feel, even if he couldn't see it. A connection that Perry never intended to foster, but couldn't bring himself to sever. And a connection that Meghan, knowingly or not, depended on during the most emotionally vulnerable period of her adult life. This was no ordinary friendship. This was something else. And as we move into the fallout, the leaked memo, Harry's reaction, and the public implosion of the Sussex-Perry alliance, one thing becomes painfully clear. This wasn't just about two people leaning on each other. It was about how, in the quiet moments away from the noise, two lives blurred at the edges and built something neither of them could take back. Fully developed, emotionally charged narrative with investigative depth and character detail. No bold text, no asterisks. There are moments that fracture narratives, moments so explosive they split time into before and after. In the case of Tyler Perry and Meghan Markle, that moment came not with a public announcement or a grainy paparazzi photo, but with a single audio file. A voice memo. Just under 2 minutes long. Unedited. Unfiltered. Recorded late at night. And once it surfaced, nothing was ever the same again. No one knows with certainty how it was leaked, but its contents were undeniable. The voice was unmistakably Meghan's. Calm, low, and emotional. Speaking not to the world, not even to Tyler Perry, but to a friend, or at least someone she trusted enough to confide in, perhaps too much. The audio was saved as a voice memo on a backup phone, one that had once belonged to Meghan before being replaced. The phone had reportedly been sent in for repair, or possibly donated. Details remain murky. But somewhere along the chain of hands it passed through, someone discovered the recording and knew its value. And within hours of it hitting the inbox of a digital tabloid editor, the entire world heard it. I don't know what's happening to me anymore. Meghan's voice begins. I feel like I'm suffocating. I feel like I gave up everything, my career, my freedom, my sense of identity. And in return, I was expected to be grateful for being silenced. But when I talk to Tyler, I feel seen. I feel understood. There is a pause. The kind of pause that tells you the speaker isn't sure if she should continue. Tyler gets me in ways Harry never could, she says next. He listens. He doesn't make me feel broken. I think I'm falling for him. Or maybe I already have. But what does that even mean when you're married to someone else? The silence that follows feels heavier than her words. To the casual listener, it was damning. To those closest to Harry, it was devastating. But to Tyler Perry, who reportedly had no idea this memo existed, it was a mirror held up in the most unforgiving light. Because while he had long known about the depth of his emotional connection with Meghan, hearing her say it out loud, in her own words, cracked the last defense he had left. Once the audio leaked, the story metastasized at the speed of scandal. News platforms from CNN to BuzzFeed to international tabloids in Europe and Australia picked it up. Within 24 hours, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Meghan Memo, hashtag emotional affair, hashtag Tyler crossed the line. TikTok videos analyzing her tone, her inflection, her pauses, were viewed tens of millions of times. Podcasts aired emergency episodes. Twitter/X users split into camps. Some blamed Perry for allowing the intimacy to flourish. Others accused Meghan of emotional betrayal. A smaller but vocal segment argued that Harry, long painted as the outsider to Meghan's ambition, had simply lost her to someone who validated her on a deeper level. But what no one knew, at least not initially, was how Harry found out. Sources close to the situation say Harry was on a late-night call with a friend in the UK when his phone began buzzing uncontrollably. Texts, calls, screenshots, links, all leading back to the same audio clip. At first, he refused to click. He didn't need to hear what strangers were already whispering about. But then came the message from one of his closest aides. I'm so sorry. I hope it's not true. But you should hear it for yourself. He did. Reportedly seated alone in a Montecito guest house, Harry listened to his wife speak about her emotional void and how it was being filled not by him, but by the man they both had trusted, the man who had once opened his home to protect them. What happened next, according to insiders, was one of the most emotionally volatile moments in Harry's post-royal life. He was said to have turned off his phone, refused contact with Meghan for hours, and reportedly locked himself in the bathroom of the house for nearly half a day. Aides were concerned enough to call in a therapist who stayed with him for the remainder of the night. At this point, Meghan was allegedly unaware that the memo had gone viral. She had been attending a private brunch with Archwell Foundation partners when someone approached her discreetly, whispering that her name was trending again. The look on her face, according to one guest, went from puzzled to stunned to shaken within seconds. She thought it was another rehashed tabloid rumor, the guest said. Then she saw the transcript. Meghan reportedly excused herself immediately and left the brunch. She tried to call Harry. No answer. She tried again. Silence. Then she tried Tyler. Sources say Perry answered on the second ring. The conversation that followed was short, measured, and unlike anything that had ever passed between them before. I didn't know that recording still existed, Meghan said. I didn't either, Perry replied. But now the world knows what I should have ended before it started. And with that, he hung up. The fallout wasn't just emotional. It was operational. Within 48 hours of the leak, Meghan's PR team issued a statement. Brief, guarded, and notably impersonal. It read, "We are aware of a private voice memo being circulated without authorization. The Duchess has no further comment at this time." There was no denial, no apology, just silence where clarity was demanded. Perry, however, didn't stay silent. Less than a week later, he posted a video to his social media, not scripted, not produced. Just him, sitting in a room with no distractions, facing the camera head-on. His voice was steady but soft. "I want to address something that's been circulating," he began. "Something I wish I could take back. Something I didn't plan, didn't orchestrate, but that I didn't stop either." He took a long pause. "I crossed a line," he continued. "What started as support, as protection, became something else. Not physical, not romantic, but emotional. And just because you don't touch someone doesn't mean you haven't gone too far." It was the first time he publicly acknowledged the depth of his bond with Meghan. And while he didn't name Harry, the next words were clearly meant for him. "I'm sorry. I never meant to break trust. I never meant to cause pain. I never thought I'd be the reason someone who already gave up so much would lose even more." The confession was met with a mix of awe and anger. Some praised Perry for his vulnerability. Others criticized him for waiting until the scandal exploded before owning his role. But what struck most people was how unfiltered the video felt, a stark contrast to Perry's usual image control. For Harry, however, the video wasn't enough. According to someone in the Sussex's inner circle, Harry felt blindsided. Not only by the memo itself, but by the reality that his wife had emotionally given herself to another man, and that man had been someone he considered a brother. You don't just forgive something like that, the source said. You don't just move on. The royal family, for their part, stayed quiet. But insiders revealed that senior aides advised Charles and William to distance the institution from the Sussexes more than ever. Camilla, in a private conversation that later leaked, reportedly said he left the monarchy for her, and now she's left him for Tyler Perry. But perhaps the most damning takeaway came from an unlikely source, one of Perry's former studio colleagues, who spoke under anonymity. Tyler always believed in rescuing people. He built a brand on that. But this time, he didn't rescue Meghan. He got entangled in her narrative. And now, he's paying the price. As public attention continued to spiral, one question remained unanswered. Was this voice memo a tragic mistake or a deliberate signal of emotional loyalty? Because even now, after all the statements, all the silence, all the emotional wreckage, that voice memo remains a ghost, echoing not just in headlines, but in the hearts of three people whose lives were forever changed by it. It was a whisper that turned into a roar, a private truth that became public betrayal. And the world would never look at Tyler Perry, Meghan Markle, or Prince Harry the same way again. Emotionally immersive, fully fleshed-out narrative, consistent tone, no bold or asterisk. There's a difference between public humiliation and private heartbreak. One is loud, played out across social media and morning talk shows, where strangers analyze your pain with reckless confidence. The other is quiet, suffocating in its stillness, where every minute feels like a weight pressing against the ribs, and the only sound that echoes is your own disbelief. Prince Harry had dealt with his fair share of public disgrace, but nothing had prepared him for this. When the leaked voice memo went viral, it wasn't just a betrayal of his marriage. It was a betrayal of his judgment, his loyalty, his blind trust in someone he had once considered not just a friend, but a protector. He hadn't heard the words, "Tyler gets me," in ways Harry never could, in a press release or in a phone call with warning. He had heard them the same way the rest of the world had, through a raw, glitchy playback of his wife's private voice, cracked with emotion, as she laid bare the emotional shift that had been quietly unfolding behind his back. The moment Harry listened to the memo, something in him reportedly broke. According to a trusted Montecito staffer who had been with the Sussex household since their arrival in the United States, Harry had been in the middle of planning a joint public appearance with Meghan, a goodwill initiative involving school nutrition programs. His phone had buzzed 3 times in rapid succession, then silence, then another burst of messages. At first, he ignored it. The barrage of notifications wasn't unusual, being Harry meant always being one viral moment away from another headache. But then came the message from a trusted UK friend. No headline, no commentary, just a link and a single sentence. "You need to hear this before the world does." He clicked. The staffer, who had been walking past the open study doorway, described seeing Harry freeze. Not flinch, not scowl, just stop. His eyes locked on the phone, hand unmoving, like he was afraid of hearing what came next but unable to look away. And as the seconds passed, as Meghan's voice whispered through the speaker, mournful and certain, Harry slowly sat down on the edge of the couch like the air had been vacuumed from his chest. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes, the staffer recalled. He just sat there staring. Then he stood up, walked into the bathroom, and didn't come out for nearly 6 hours. In that silence, panic set in. A security team member eventually knocked, and when there was no response, they forced the door open. What they found was not a man in physical distress, but one emotionally dismantled. Harry was seated on the floor, head in his hands, eyes puffy and red. A therapist affiliated with their family was immediately contacted and stayed with him through the night. Insiders say Meghan was unaware of any of this, at least initially. She had been scheduled for a remote virtual meeting with Netflix creatives, one of the final strategy sessions for their upcoming series, when her phone rang 3 times, ignored. On the 4th, she finally picked up. It was their chief of staff. "Harry knows," the voice said. Meghan reportedly paused. "Knows what?" "The recording. It's everywhere." That was the last thing said before the call dropped. She tried calling Harry immediately, but there was no answer. Then she tried again. Still nothing. Then she called Tyler. And when he answered, coolly, distantly, and ended the call with a sentence that felt like finality, she knew the walls were collapsing. Later that evening, Harry emerged from isolation, but he didn't speak to Meghan. According to household insiders, he instructed staff not to allow her into the guest wing, where he had retreated. He asked for space, for privacy, for peace. And for the first time since their move to America, he wasn't asking for those things to shield Meghan, but to shield himself from her. Friends say that in the hours after the leak, Harry's reaction moved through phases: numbness, anger, shame, and then reflection. But most consistent throughout was a profound sense of betrayal, not just by Meghan, but by Perry. It had been Harry, after all, who trusted Perry without hesitation. When the UK tabloids grew vicious, when his own security detail had been stripped, when they felt the whole world had turned on them, it was Perry who opened his home and his life. That man had taken their calls, protected their child, and promised he would never let them be harmed. Now, in Harry's eyes, Perry had become the harm. One former aide, who had worked closely with Harry during his transition from the UK, shared a chilling account of Harry's private words following the leak. "He looked at me and said, 'I left a crown for her, and she gave her heart to someone else.' That's when I knew this wasn't just a marriage crisis. This was something deeper." In the days that followed, Harry canceled all public appearances. Meghan was seen once, driving with a close friend, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses, lips tight with stress. They no longer shared rooms. They no longer ate together. Their household, once a tightly choreographed operation built around family unity, began to drift into separate routines. Harry waking early, Meghan sleeping late. Harry working from the guest house, Meghan from the main estate. What stung most for Harry, insiders say, wasn't the memo itself. It was what the memo confirmed, that all the signs he'd noticed over the past year were not his imagination. That the long nights Meghan spent consulting with Perry weren't just professional. That the retreat weekends had, indeed, become personal. That he had been slowly displaced from his wife's emotional world, one quiet conversation at a time. A close friend of Harry's from his UK days reportedly reached out in a private call to offer support. He told me, "I thought we were healing together. Turns out, she found healing with someone else." There was no screaming, no dramatic confrontations. Meghan, according to a source close to her, tried multiple times to initiate conversation. She denied ever intending to hurt Harry. She insisted that the memo was a personal reflection made in a moment of vulnerability, not an ongoing declaration of infidelity. She begged for understanding, clarity, and a chance to explain. But Harry, for the first time since their union, didn't want explanations. He wanted distance. And that distance came with consequences. Within 2 weeks of the voice memo leak, Harry reportedly contacted a legal team specializing in private marital agreements. It wasn't about divorce, at least not yet. But it was about understanding the options. What separation might look like. What would happen to their joint ventures? How custody would be handled should things escalate. According to one legal associate, Harry was not in a state of rage, but one of sad calculation. Meghan, meanwhile, retained her own legal counsel, not because she anticipated a fight, but because the memo's fallout had now breached professional territory. There were brand partnerships at stake, Netflix executives who were questioning optics, foundations funded by donors who expected transparency and unity. The memo had not only shattered Harry's trust, it had triggered a reputational wildfire for Meghan that could burn through years of carefully constructed narratives. Still, behind the professional maneuvering was something more fragile. A marriage now living on the edge of two truths. The truth Harry had believed, that they were a united front, healing together, and the truth the world now heard in Meghan's own voice, that she had found emotional refuge elsewhere. One nighttime staff member shared a haunting image from that week. "I walked past the guest house around 2 a.m. Harry was sitting outside on the porch, alone, wrapped in a blanket. No phone, no drink, just staring at the sky. I don't think he even realized anyone could see him. That wasn't a prince. That was a man who just lost something he thought was permanent." In that moment, The cost of loyalty, trust, and vulnerability came full circle for Harry. He had abandoned centuries of royal duty for love. He had endured mockery, exile, and relentless press to stand beside Meghan. And now, he faced the hardest truth of all, that love, no matter how loud or sincere at first, can still quietly drift away into someone else's hands. Detailed narrative, balanced tone, no bold or asterisks. In the wake of the explosive leak, while the public and media swirled with judgment and speculation, Meghan Markle found herself facing an unprecedented crisis, one that threatened not only her marriage, but her entire public identity. Unlike the usual royal controversies that involved whispered palace intrigues or tabloid fabrications, this was different. This was a raw, unfiltered confession from her own voice. Yet, Meghan was quick to assert that the narrative being spun was a distortion of a complex emotional reality. According to insiders within Meghan's close circle, the Duchess was devastated, not only by the betrayal of trust implicit in the leak, but by the way her words were weaponized. She maintained that the voice memo was never meant to be a public declaration of infidelity, but a vulnerable expression of her mental state during a particularly difficult period in her life. She was speaking to a friend, not writing a headline, one confidant explained. Meghan's defense centered on the concept of emotional complexity, the idea that emotional connections can exist alongside commitment without necessarily violating the bonds of marriage. For Meghan, the support she found in Tyler Perry was a lifeline, a balm for the pressures she endured daily as a former royal and a woman navigating the labyrinthine Hollywood ecosystem. The voice memo, she and her team argued, reflected moments of loneliness, confusion, and the search for understanding, not an intention to betray her husband. From Meghan's perspective, the framing of the situation as an emotional affair was simplistic and unfair. Emotional affairs, she believed, were a symptom of deeper marital struggles, not a cause. Sources close to her report that Meghan felt suffocated by the expectation that she could maintain a flawless public image while grappling privately with trauma and isolation. The voice memo was a glimpse into her humanity, messy, conflicted, but sincere. Mental health professionals who reviewed the situation emphasized this nuance. Dr. Laura Middleton, a clinical psychologist specializing in relationship dynamics, explains, emotional affairs occur when one partner seeks intimacy, validation, or connection outside the marriage, often due to unmet needs. They can be incredibly damaging, but also reveal underlying fractures that require attention and healing. Meghan's supporters argue that what she sought in Tyler was empathy, a listening ear free from judgment, something she struggled to find even within her marriage. It was not a secret rendezvous or a calculated betrayal, but a desperate reach for emotional survival in a world that constantly scrutinized her every move. This perspective, however, did not come without challenges. Critics questioned whether Meghan had crossed ethical boundaries by fostering such an intense emotional bond with Perry, especially while still married. Was it fair to Harry? Did she fully understand the consequences of her actions? And what did it say about the state of their marriage? In public appearances following the leak, Meghan adopted a carefully measured stance. While she did not directly address the voice memo, she emphasized themes of healing, forgiveness, and resilience. In interviews and social media statements, she highlighted the importance of mental health awareness and the complexity of human relationships. Her message was clear: people are not defined by their lowest moments, but by their capacity to grow beyond them. Some media outlets interpreted this approach as evasive. Others saw it as a mature attempt to rise above scandal. Regardless, Meghan's legal and public relations teams worked tirelessly to manage the fallout, seeking to refocus the narrative on her philanthropic efforts and creative projects. Behind the scenes, Meghan's inner circle was mobilizing as well. Trusted advisors reportedly arranged for private counseling sessions for both Meghan and Harry, encouraging open dialogue and counseling to address the emotional wounds exposed by the scandal. The hope was to salvage the marriage and rebuild trust, but the path forward was unclear and fraught with tension. Interestingly, Meghan's defense also included a pointed critique of the media's role in amplifying the scandal. Her team argued that the leak was a deliberate attempt to undermine her credibility and destabilize the Sussex brand, which had become a powerful platform for social justice and mental health advocacy. They accused certain outlets of sensationalism, exploiting personal pain for clicks and ratings. Social media reaction reflected this divide. While many condemned Meghan for emotional infidelity, a significant portion of her supporters rallied behind her, condemning what they called misogynistic double standards and unfair royal scrutiny. Online campaigns encouraged empathy and understanding, calling for respect for Meghan's privacy and mental health. In addition to external pressures, Meghan faced internal conflict. Multiple sources revealed moments of regret and introspection, suggesting she understood the impact of her emotional closeness with Harry on Harry and their marriage. Yet, she also expressed frustration over feeling isolated and misunderstood, trapped between public expectations and private realities. Her defenders note that Meghan's experience is emblematic of a broader cultural conversation about the nature of emotional fidelity, the pressures of public life, and the challenges faced by women balancing personal needs with public roles. They argue that this scandal, while painful, opens necessary dialogue on these often taboo topics. Yet, questions linger. Could Meghan have handled the situation differently? Did she set clear boundaries? Or did she allow lines to blur until it was too late? Was Perry a willing participant in this emotional entanglement? Or was he also caught in a web he did not intend to weave? Ultimately, Meghan's defense rests on one fundamental assertion, that human relationships are rarely black and white, and that emotional complexity deserves compassion, not condemnation. Whether the world accepts this or not remains to be seen, as the ripple effects of the scandal continue to unfold across royal circles, Hollywood, and global media. Fully detailed, emotionally nuanced, no bold or asterisks. When the voice memo of Meghan Markle leaked, it sent shockwaves through the worlds of royalty and Hollywood alike. But few expected the next act of this unfolding drama, Tyler Perry stepping forward to publicly acknowledge his role in the emotional entanglement that had quietly developed behind closed doors. Known for his typically guarded nature and tightly controlled public image, Perry's decision to make a raw, unfiltered confession caught everyone off guard. His video appeared first on his official Instagram account late one evening, quickly amassing millions of views and shares. Sitting alone in a simple, dimly lit room, devoid of any set dressing or theatrical polish, Perry looked directly into the camera with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of personal regret and responsibility. The absence of his usual charisma was striking. Here was a man stripped bare, confessing a truth he could no longer hide. "I want to talk about something personal," Perry began, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "Something I wish I could undo, something I should have stopped before it ever started. This is about Meghan. This is about Harry. And this is about me." He paused, gathering himself before continuing. "It started as support, a safe space, a place to listen. I was supposed to be a friend, a mentor, a brother, a protector. But somewhere along the way, that support turned into something more. Something I didn't intend. Something I didn't want. But something I couldn't stop." Perry's words were deliberate, measured, and deeply human. He admitted the bond with Meghan had gone beyond friendship but was careful to emphasize it was not physical. There was no kiss. There was no secret meeting in the shadows. But emotional lines were crossed. Boundaries were blurred. And that, in its own way, is betrayal. The video continued with Perry expressing profound remorse, not just for the emotional affair itself, but for the pain it had caused Harry, whom he described as a brother and a man I respect deeply. "Harry, I'm sorry," Perry said. "I never meant to hurt you or break your trust. I was only trying to help someone I cared about. But sometimes, helping means knowing when to step back. And I failed at that." For viewers, this confession was stunning. It was rare to see a man of Perry's stature admit vulnerability so openly, especially on a topic as fraught as emotional infidelity involving one of the most scrutinized women in the world. Hollywood insiders quickly weighed in. Some praised Perry's courage, calling his honesty refreshing in a world of calculated PR damage control. Others questioned the timing, wondering why Perry had chosen to speak only after the memo's leak forced his hand. Among Perry's colleagues, opinions varied. A longtime friend shared that Perry had been carrying this secret like a heavy burden for months but feared the impact it would have on his reputation and on Meghan's. Another close associate suggested that Perry saw speaking out as a way to regain some control over a narrative spiraling beyond anyone's grasp. Perry's confession also sparked a fierce debate about the nature of emotional affairs. Was an emotional connection without physical contact truly betrayal? Could such relationships cause damage equal to or greater than physical infidelity? Experts in psychology and relationship counseling weighed in across media outlets, using Perry's admission as a case study for the complexities of human attachment and fidelity. Amid the public scrutiny, Perry remained mostly silent outside the video. He declined most interview requests, choosing instead to focus on his creative projects and personal healing. Yet, his confession marked a turning point in the scandal, shifting some of the spotlight from Meghan and Harry to himself. For Harry, Perry's admission was both a relief and a fresh wound. While it validated Harry's suspicions and feelings of betrayal, it also highlighted the extent of the emotional breach. Some insiders report that Harry, despite his anger and pain, appreciated Perry's willingness to own his part in the fractured relationship. The royal family, however, remained largely silent on the matter. Palace sources suggested the admission deepened the family's concerns about the Sussexes' ongoing involvement with high-profile Hollywood figures and complicated efforts to manage the monarchy's image amid a torrent of negative publicity. Meanwhile, Meghan's reaction to Perry's confession was mixed. Close friends described her as grateful for Tyler's honesty, but also frustrated by the way things had been made public. She reportedly wished the issue could have been resolved privately, without the intrusion of the media frenzy. The video also reignited public debate over Meghan's role in the situation. Some commentators viewed Perry's words as a tacit acknowledgement that Meghan had crossed emotional boundaries. Others framed Perry's confession as a sacrificial act to shield Meghan from further harm. Throughout the controversy, one theme remained clear. The emotional complexity of relationships in the glare of public life is rarely black and white. Perry's confession humanized a scandal that could easily have been reduced to tabloid caricature, reminding the world that behind every headline are real people grappling with pain, regret, and the messy consequences of their choices. As this chapter closes, Tyler Perry's candid confession stands as a rare moment of transparency in an often opaque and controlled celebrity culture. A moment that both complicates and deepens our understanding of loyalty, friendship, and love. Chaos. Tonight, we dive into the jaw-dropping moment Lauren Sanchez publicly roasted Meghan at Jeff Bezos and Lauren's lavish Venice ceremony. Why did Meghan crash the event? What explosive words did Lauren unleash that left the crowd gasping? And how could this drama ripple through Meghan's already turbulent public life? Stay tuned as we unpack every shocking detail behind this unforgettable clash.